Hello. So here I have an opportunity to share with you some of the ideas that we use on a daily basis in our hypnotherapy practice. Students and clients alike often ask us where some of these ideas come from and whether we can explain them further. So in an effort to save therapy time and also in an effort to share with you some of this philosophy, we've put together a series of papers that I believe you will find very useful. This paper is called They Discovered Something, but it's not for the fainted of heart. And I'd like to make a few comments about it before you read and listen to it. So, the first thing to keep in mind is that it is common for, we have shared this particular paper with literally thousands of people, and in some cases, the feedback has been a little odd. People feel a bit offended. They tell me that it almost feels like the writer, me in this case, is being a little harsh or even a little arrogant in some ways, because I write it in second person. But there's a point to it, and I think that if you study the paper a bit more carefully, you're going to understand why we get that reaction. That's exactly what the paper is attempting to explain. And the basic notion behind this paper, and if you get this, you can understand the paper differently. The basic premise behind what it's being explained is that there is a duality within us all, meaning we're not just one thing. So we always tell clients that the first thing that we have to discard in order to do proper therapy is this notion of individuality. So we use the word individual as a synonym to the word person or that person, that individual. We use the word commonly in our language, and we bring that idea into therapy, and we remind people, look, the words that we use actually are just symbols for concepts, and the more we use a particular word, the more we begin to believe that the concept is actually true, such as the concept of individual or individuality, which comes from the concept that we're not divisible, or there's only one of us, one big monolithic self. And as your experience suggests, I'm sure, and as this paper shows, we're not one thing. We're a collection of things, actually. We have many bodies, and we also have many aspects to our being. In this particular case, we talk about the duality between what we think we are and what we actually are. But depending on how we represent this, we can divide the human being into many, many different kinds of parts. Of course, those are all models, but it's impossible to understand human suffering and healing without this concept of divisibility. So we're all divisible or individuals, not individuals. And it's an important idea to keep in mind. Just to give an idea, think of a point of unity and think of a being or a person, if you will, or an entity that is absolutely indivisible. Really. I mean, there are no parts to it, it's just one whole. And for lack of a better word, or if you want a label to that particular entity, we can call it God or the Absolute. We're not like that in a certain way. We're not. We are divisible. We have different. Because when you look at a person that has a lot of suffering and problems in their lives, you're going to notice that they switch very drastically from one mode to another very, very quickly and drastically. They literally become different people. In fact, in the extreme situation, you have from the Greek the concept of schisis or schizo, and the concept of a mind or a brain, phrenius. So you have the idea, the word that we have all heard, it's schizophrenia or a split mind. That's where the word comes from. And in individuals who are afflicted with this unfortunate mental disorder, what you find is a very sharp distinction between one set of behaviors and another. And I know that that does not correspond to the modern description of the illness, but what I'm saying to you is the historical name of the illness comes from the observation that you don't seem to have just one person there. However, this is the extreme case. In the non-extreme case, perhaps of you and I, we also present different aspects to our nature. We switch back and forth, but perhaps not so drastically, and that corresponds very well to our level of functionality and productivity in the world. So as a person moves from this split into more unity, perhaps we don't reach full unity, but we become more united, more integrated, we also become more healed, we become more generous. Generativity or generosity is one of the things that you see increasing in people as they heal. They begin to concern themselves not only with the effect of their actions upon others, but actually with the quality of others' lives, particularly the next generation. What kind of world are we going to leave behind for the next generation? And that's called generativity. We want to be generous in the common sense of the word, but also generative in the sense that we want to generate a benefit for others. So what you're going to read is this notion of duality, and the premise of the paper is that what separates one entity from the other, this is quite metaphorical, of course, but what separates the two is this thing that we call thought. And thinking, which is what most people believe they are, I am my thoughts. People mostly think that they might not explicitly think that they're their thoughts, but they give their thoughts a whole great deal of attention and importance. So what you're going to discover by observing the concepts presented in this paper is that the thought is circular and generic. Those are the two ideas that are presented in this paper. Thought is circular and generic. And because you cannot be circular and generic, in other words, circular meaning there's no purpose, it just keep on going around in circles, and generic meaning we're all the same, and we're not, you're different, we're unique people. So you realize that we cannot be our thoughts. This idea that thought is generic and circular, the way it's presented in the paper has been labeled by some as a bit offensive, a bit arrogant, but it isn't. That's not the spirit of the paper. The spirit of the paper is, let's take a look at what we are and what we're not, so that we can place our emphasis and develop the part of us that actually represent who we are, not the part of us that isn't who we are. That's what the whole point is. The more we emphasize what we're not, the worse the quality of our lives. Our lives become better to the extent that we emphasize and nourish and nurture the part of us that represents who we truly are. And that is certainly not our thoughts. It turns out that when a person cultivates and nourishes who they really are, their spiritual selves, their inner selves, it turns out that their thoughts become much more peaceful and constructive. But that's an after effect. That's a consequence, not a cause. So have fun listening to the paper. In this video, you're going to listen to the paper, and there's a link in here where you can click on it and get the actual physical paper and read it if you'd like to. If you miss a word or something and you'd like to read it here, you can listen to it, and then you can click on it and listen. People have asked us to explain this in more detail, and we're going to be announcing to you shortly a webinar in which we can all get together and interact and ask questions, and I think you're going to enjoy this a great deal. So have fun listening to the paper, and as always, let me know if you have any comments or questions. Thank you. A radical discovery, not for the faint-hearted. I discovered something. Once I discovered it, it became clear that this has always been known, although to only a few, despite being freely available to all. Discovering the same thing for yourself would radically change your life. And I mean radically, meaning from the root. Everything you ever thought to be true may turn out to be false, and what you now think of as unthinkable may be your only connection to real reality. I could explain in detail how I know what you're about to contemplate, but that would not be useful. The essence of what follows either sounds true to you or it does not. If this sounds true to you, stay with me, listen to what I have discovered, how you can discover the same thing for yourself and free yourself from the agony and anguish that you feel but cannot explain. On the other hand, if you cannot quite identify with what you have heard so far, no amount of explanation and justification would suffice, and no attempt should be made to convince you of anything. My name is not important, and frankly neither is yours. Not because it don't matter, quite the opposite. You and I matter a lot. but because you are not who you think you are. In fact, you don't even think at all. What you think you are does not think originally either, for thought itself is circular and generic. The circularity of thought has caused you to chase one illusion after another, each time thinking that the attainment of the next illusion, which you mistook for reality, would improve the quality of your life. Something within you tells you that your life is no better today than it ever was. When you take it all into account, you know it is all the same as it has always been. But that conclusion has always frightened you, so you have alternated between total oblivion and the race towards another illusion. In fact, you are already an expert on oblivion. You call that relaxation. Do drugs or alcohol ring a bell? How about mindless eating, mindlessly watching television, or a well-deserved pornography session? A heated argument with no clear purpose with someone you see as weak? Does that make you feel awake and meaningful, at least until the next relaxation event? You know that those blocks of time were not even wasted, as in having zero effect upon your growth and development as a human being. The truth is, they set you back, away from your supposed objectives. In some cases, the way you relaxed yourself compromised your health, then degraded you, and contributed to more pain and suffering to others. When you engage in oblivion, you tell yourself you deserve to relax because after all, you work hard, and your life is not easy. But after each event, you feel guilty, sometimes unconsciously, so you attempt to redeem yourself by a form of self-punishment that you call hard work. People have asked you why you work so hard. The truth is, you have no idea why you do it, but you have always answered the same thing, not knowing what any of it means. Sometimes you claim to be pursuing financial stability and security, reasonable because you never felt so unstable and insecure as you do now. Other times you claim to want to provide for your loved ones. That's reasonable because you have no idea what love is. But who knows? You mindlessly tell yourself and continue alternating between oblivion and the self-punishment of hard work, believing it to be necessary in order to obtain your next goal, another illusion which you tell yourself really matters. In addition to being circular, thought is also generic, for thought can be hacked. Because the mind functions at two levels simultaneously, conscious and unconscious, it is possible to implant ideas into a mind at an unconscious level in such a way that the person will have the conscious experience of original thought. This experience, however, is not original. It is generic mind hacking, since the same exact thing is happening to many people all at once. Consider 3 examples of this phenomenon: subliminal advertising, political speech, and fashion. The classical description of subliminal advertising involves flashes of a product displayed within a movie. The flashes were so rapid that the conscious mind was not aware of their presence, yet sales of that product increased at the theater where the experiment was carried out. This description is overly simplistic and not entirely correct factually, but it does serve to illustrate the concept of subliminal transmission of information. The key point here is that, in this example, people consuming the product thus advertised were not telling themselves, "I must consume this product because I've been instructed to do so." No, they simply felt like having that particular product. They just thought they had an original idea, when in reality the idea was implanted in their minds. Here's the second example. Have you ever asked yourself what a politician actually said when they speak? If you did, you will conclude that the very little content was actually delivered in typical political speech. The same goes for some forms of sales speech, romantic speech, and most generic human talking. What is particular about high-level political speech is that it's not designed to transfer information. It is intentionally designed, carefully engineered to elicit an emotional, irrational, passionate response from the public that has nothing to do with reason or facts. Political passion resembles religious fervor for a good reason. They both make their way into the unconscious portion of the mind, creating a response from the person that seems to that person to be original thought, but it's not. Lastly, consider fashion. When asked why they consume certain products or dress a certain way, a fashionable person will say that they are thus expressing their unique individuality, forgetting that a few other million people are doing the exact same thing. See the magic here? The person feels entirely unique and original while actually imitating everybody else. The same bug infects many people who all do and say the same thing, all while feeling unique and different. The above examples illustrate how people come to conclusions that they label as rational and original, when indeed ideas have been hacked into their minds. It feels like original thinking to each person, but it was put there by outside influences. By now, you may be feeling uncomfortable, perhaps insulted. The uncomfortable and insulted one is not you. It is something within you. It is something you think is you. Who you are is always comfortable and simply cannot be insulted. Indeed, your name is not important because you are not who you think you are. This is not about mistaken identity or switching of babies at birth. It is about duality. Look at it. You are not who you think you are. Do you see it? Do you hear it? There are two of you. There's one who you actually are, and there's one who you think you are. What separates the two? You guessed it. You see, it's thought or thinking. You have always been told to think about it. Think carefully and think it over. The thought process has been elevated to the altar of unquestioned infallibility where it does not belong. But it is worse than that. By being carefully urged to think, you have come to accept and understand yourself to be your thoughts or the conclusions your thoughts generate. Clearly, you cannot be your thoughts, for thought is circular and generic, while you are purposeful and unique. You have not only come to identify yourself with your thoughts or your mind, it's worse than that. As thinking develops, encouraged by the outside world of grown-ups, it eventually feels so real to the person that it drowns out their inner voices, their true selves. In time, a duality develops. In addition to the true inner self, a fictitious identity carefully sewn into the mind from the outer world competes for your attention and eventually wins. Now, you think you are who you think you are, not who you are. From your perspective, you were originally one, your true self. Over time, outside ideas find their way into the mind, crafting the rudiments of a new identity. Some call that the person, as in the Latin persona. Initially, you were aware of who you are. As this persona developed, you made more and more use of it. A duality thus ensued, and now there were two instead of one of you. That duality was unbearable to the point of generating turmoil in your life. But you figured it all out in time. You hid the true self deep within and convinced yourself that you are the persona. Something curious happened then. Because the duality was resolved back into unity, initially you felt better. So you concluded that you must be onto something, that you must be on the right path, and invested even more energy into convincing yourself that you are the thought-based persona. That sense of unity created enthusiasm for a while. You felt a great deal of energy, which you applied into chasing goals that ultimately didn't matter to you, and relaxing away the nagging sensation that something was missing from your life. You are now embarking on a discovery journey. You have consciously suspected this for a long time. Only now, you are willing to investigate this idea further. It seems that everywhere you look nowadays, the same idea shows up. You are sure that finding this article right now must not be a coincidence. There must be a purpose for it in your life right now. What has been missing is the part of you long ago hidden away. Resurrecting that part of you brings back duality, and with it, some turmoil is common. The road ahead has a few bumps, so you need a guide. someone who has done this before you. The bumps are like screams from the persona begging to have its reign over your life restored. But there is no going back. For now, you're aware of this duality. There are two of you, the real self and the persona who you thought you are. Here's how the bumps on the road manifest. At times, you will be genuinely confused as to which is which, who the real self is and who the persona is. The sensations created by the persona can be so intense and heartfelt that you will literally think of it as coming from your true self. This confusion will lead you down erroneous paths that generate more and more pain as you advance on the path towards unification. Other times, you will be quite clear about what each part of you wants to do, but you will be unable to act according to the dictates of your soul, your real self. You will discover that you are addicted to the sensations produced by the persona. These two types of bumps will delay your progress somewhat, but there's no cause for alarm because ultimately time itself does not exist. Eventually, one will emerge victorious, the real you. The persona will still be around, now serving simply as an interface with other personas in this world of illusions. There will be peace and purpose in your life. You will never feel alone, empty, or desperate again. The relationship between effort and reward will be restored, and you will be able to create your own destiny. You will use your life and talents to discover ever more precisely what you are really like and to help others achieve the same. As always, Flavio Souza-Campos.